near the Akapana, and that's located right here on the site plan, the aerial, there is this, a bit smaller, but nevertheless pretty impressive. It is a sunken courtyard and a temple, we think a sunken temple, so it's subterranean. It is lined with fairly well-crafted stonework and a series of tenon heads going around the side walls. These tenon heads in part make this such a famous place. We think it might be the oldest part of the site, and one of the things that's kind of interesting about it is that the style of the heads changes. It's not the same. So we think that perhaps these heads were added over time. We don't know for sure what they represent. It might be people from different parts of Tiwanaku's influence range who come here maybe as pilgrims. We can't be sure, but let me show you a closer look at these. This may give you a little bit better sense for the quality of the stonework. The stonework that the folks in the highlands of Bolivia created, Tiwanaku, was so famous that when this region was conquered by the Inca later on, they're gonna scarf up all of the stonecutters and the stoneworkers because they too, the Inca, valued stonework, and they wanted to have the very best folks who would be able to make things for them. The image that we have right here, I think, does show you the quality of the stone cutting. Our textbook, Professor Stone, calls this, quote, regular coursed ashlars. What that means is cut stone that is frequently used facing buildings, so it's meant to be seen. It's a public display of good stonework. A flat surface characterizes Tiwanaku, as opposed to what the Inca are going to do later on. They like to accent the divisions between the stones by beveling the edges. We're going to talk about that later. But they did love stonework. These are also as part of the regular coursed ashlars at Tiwanaku. However, they are created by taking stones of different sizes and fitting them together, different heights, different widths. If we go over here, we're going to see a rectangle, an upright rectangle, next to another stone, which I think we could say is a rectangle along the horizon. We're going to go up here, and again, we're going to have a taller rectangle next to a shorter one, and both of the two rectangles here are going to be topped by a horizontal rectangular form. It becomes a kind of grid work, almost reminding us of a textile pattern, in fact, that is also studded with these tenon heads. This might give you a little bit of a sense of its subterranean qualities, the fact that it is sunken, and you can see the heads all the way around. Let me give you a closer look at some of the heads. Okay, here are three distinct ones. These two heads very close together in the wall itself, and then in the lower right I have a third head, which happens to be particularly well preserved. I think you can see that all three of these look like they were created with very different prototypes, different in style. The one that is in the lower right comes closest to what we think is characteristic Tiwanaku, with its kind of square eyes. The one over here in the lower left, folks, I can't explain at all. It's created in a vastly different style, incredibly simplified in form, and there are other heads like that as well. So these were created over time, and they are created in different elements of style, and they may represent people who are coming here, visiting the site, or diverse people under the control or influence of the rulers at Tiwanaku. Several pieces of sculpture have also been located in that sunken court. Probably the most famous of those are figure 115, which is located in our textbook, and it's called the Bennett Monument. Mr. Bennett was a pretty famous archaeologist working here, so the object was named after him. This is the biggest of the pieces of sculpture that we have, going up 24 feet, and that's pretty impressive, and weighing over 7 tons. It is very similar to figure figure 117 in our textbook, which is the Ponce Monument, which is originally located by modern folks in the Calasasia, which is another one of the temple complexes at this site. I cannot guarantee that either one of these originally stood in those locations, because we do know that the stones have been moved. Certainly we know that as we'll get to in a minute, the Gate of the Sun was definitely moved. So I can't guarantee that these belong in a specific spot where they're located today. But what I can suggest is that they are related to each other, and that's what I would like to I'll talk about briefly. Both of these are typical Tiwanaku in terms of style. They're very blocky figures. They follow a kind of rigid geometry. Yes, it might be curving around the shape of the stone, but they do in fact adhere to the block of stone. They also rely on relief decoration on the surface. Some portions of the surface project more than others, and portions of the surface are actually quite flat in terms of relief decoration. The author of our textbook asserts that these are figures related to shamans, and perhaps because the work on our left, the Bennett monolith, really is 24 feet tall and therefore very, very tall, it might represent the most important of the shamans, or the super priest essentially in charge. I can't tell you if that is true, but I think it's pretty clear that these are related to transformational images and to shamanism, which seems to have played such an important role at Tiwanaku. Okay. These are details so that we can get maybe a little bit of a closer look at these figures. The Ponce Monument, which comes from the Calasasia, which is on our right. I have a little bit better picture so you can see, and it's also, by the way, I think in a little bit better condition. You can see the characteristic kind of square or rectangular eye shape, and then a kind of teardrop that comes down from that, richly carved in relief decoration. These two figures are both holding things, so they resemble positions that we see at Chavin also. The things that they're holding generally are interpreted to be caros. That's a feasting cup, or a cup that one could drink out of. I'm going to say more about that with Wari. And snuff trays. Both of these might be related to consuming hallucinogens that would cause transformation of the individual. In the case of our figures, I'm going to go with this as a caro, and it does tend to resemble this. Kind of looks like a tumbler, like a tall vessel that you could drink out of. And I kind of like this one because look, out of the top of it, we've got two, I'm going to call them vision serpents that might be emerging. In other words, this might reference some kind of ingestion of probably corn beer that was laced with an hallucinogen. We also, in the other hand, might be dealing with a snuff tablet. And let me just show you what one of those looks like. This is one that actually was located at Tiwanaku. It's a little tray where you could put your materials and grind them a little further or spread them out, and you could sniff them in so that you could very easily ingest the item that would give you the ability to leave this world behind and enter another one. This is typical of Tiwanaku because in this we have a little puma up here. So I'd like you to imagine being a jaguar and transforming into a feline, in this case a puma, by ingesting these drugs. The Tiwanaku civilization, unlike Chavin, tends to favor its own local flora and fauna. In particular, it likes to give us a puma instead of the exotic jaguar from the jungle. It likes to give us the condor, which is also a local bird, and it is very attached to llamas, which are local highlands animals, but also associated with wealth, in particular in terms of the caravan trade that took place in the highlands of Peru. This is figure 116, which is located in our textbook. And what it is a diagram of the or rather low relief carvings that decorate the Bennett stele or the Bennett standing stone. For those of you who want to know this in detail, I'm going to suggest that you read about it in our textbook. For right now, I think this is way too much to absorb. So what I am going to do is pick out one little piece of it, and I've got an arrow so that it's this little figure over here. To do the rest of it, I think would take a very long time and might make us all a little crazy. So let's look at a detail. This is that tiny detail, or reasonably small detail, that is on the Bennett monolith or the Bennett stele. People call it different things. It shows us a central figure, very formal, very symmetrical, created with geometry as its base. The lines themselves are, if you go around the face in particular, a little bit curving. So yes, geometry is present, but in Tiwanaku we add in some curving outlines. What I would like you to see is that our figure, and this figure is paralleled in many other examples of formal frontal figures who are holding things, perhaps related to Chavin iconography, especially the staff god. I would like you to see that we have pretty clear references to shamanism. And in particular, if we go right here, I do believe that this is a reference to a flower, and there's one on the opposite side. These have been identified as flowers that grow on plants that can be, their products, their beans essentially, can be pulverized and used as snuff, creating a Vilca powder, and that this would be one of the many opportunities to ingest an hallucinogen, which would help to alter the consciousness of the shaman. I'm not an expert in the flowers of hallucinogenic plants, but I would like to suggest that we haven't forgotten San Pedro, and I think up in the center of the headdress, the raid headdress of our figure, we might also have a San Pedro flower. So we have a series of hallucinogenic sources. We also have some chicanas. In this case, cross-form, specifically reduced arms, but cross-form chicanas. But nevertheless, I think that that is a reference to the portal, the axis mundi in which we could travel. And we have snake heads coming out, which probably reference visions, the vision serpent, essentially. So I think there's enough here to make the argument that the Bennett carving, the monolith, the stele, does reference shamanism and could, in fact, be the most important of all of the shamans at Tiwanaku.